Hey pillars, and welcome back to the cycling video. In this video I'll be talking about 5 road bike upgrades that actually don't live up to the hype, and that is for riders that think these upgrades are actually going to make them faster, but in reality they do not. Now the overview of this video is for a variety of upgrades including wheels to pedals to clothing, and why I don't think these upgrades are worth it for the average rider. And if this video gets above 200 likes, I will be doing a part 2 because I think there's a lot of upgrades that get pushed onto the average cyclist and also the beginner cyclist that just don't live up to the hype, and I think it's worth shedding some light on. Now the first section is deep section rims. Now deep section rims might make you feel like you're blasting off and cutting through the air at laser speeds, but the upgrade is just not worth it unless you are a criterium racer or primarily ride very flat routes. Now one of the major benefits of deep dish rims is that they offer the benefit of just being more aerodynamic, but then they are heavier compared to a medium depth rim or a shallow rim, so you are having that weight penalty. The biggest downside of deep section rims is that they tend to handle very badly in crosswinds, which means that if you're not the best bike handler, you should very much stay away from this upgrade because it can be very unsafe, especially if you're not well experienced. Now in other words, I like to use this analogy when talking about deep section rims. It's basically like a flashy sports car. They look nice, but they're not very practical for everyday use. And that's not to say that deep section rims don't have their benefits. If you're going to be using it for maybe a criterium slash TT setup, then obviously the aerodynamic benefits that you gain from these wheels will be worth it. But for the average rider, upgrading to really deep section rims, it just kind of irks me seeing it because there's just so many drawbacks that they could not have to, sacrifice if they went for a shallow rim or just something 50 millimeters or less. Now the next section is lightweight pedals. Now the rider that usually tends to upgrade their pedals to a lightweight version is someone that is more of a weight weenie or is concerned about their climbing. So upgrading in their minds, could serve a purpose of decreasing the overall weight of their bike. But in terms of the actual performance benefit that lightweight pedals provide, it's very low. And I would say that in probably 9 times out of 10 cases, a high quality set of standard pedals can provide pretty much all the similar performance at a lower cost compared to investing into a lightweight pedal that is just going to have that big price tag to get that weight down. And when it comes to lightweight pedals, it's basically paying a premium price to save a couple grams compared to the standard pedal, and it's just not usually going to make that big of a difference in terms of overall weight. I think there's better weight savings and aerodynamic improvements that you can make if you're trying to really refine your best times or best efforts compared to just increasing the price on your pedals, hoping that it's going to decrease your bike and then thus make you a better cyclist. I just think that's a very poor use of funds. And that's not to say, I always like to play devil's advocate. Lightweight pedals do serve their advantage, which is what they were designed for. So they could be more aerodynamic and lighter, which would make, climbing easier. Now, obviously that's the weight aspect, not necessarily aerodynamics, but obviously that plays a role for, the course of a ride. Now it comes down to obviously rider preference and budget if they should go for a lightweight pedal. There's a set of Speedplay 0 nanogram pedals that I saw online for 600 USD, meaning that if you are a top tier racer or have the funds and you want to get every benefit, obviously these pedals are going to improve. But if we're being real, compared to an Ultegra set of pedals or even 105 pedals, it's going to be so negligible. Was that 600 USD worth spending? And could you have not spent that on optimizing something else? Now, probably one of the most specific upgrades is expensive saddles. Now, upgrading your saddle might actually be worth doing. And when you think of it from a logical standpoint, you might be saying, I spend a lot of time in the saddle, so if I spend more money, I should get additional comfort and performance benefits. But sometimes money doesn't actually equate to a benefit or an improvement on the saddle. Now, from my years in the cycling industry, I've had my fair share of being involved in bike fits, and I would say that a lot of times what you would think would be a more comfortable saddle, meaning a more expensive saddle, actually is less comfortable than a medium price saddle. So just because the price tag is bigger doesn't mean it equates, like I was saying, to better comfort, better rideability, better everything. It just doesn't work like that. It's very user specific, rider specific, and very individual. And I really want to highlight that each saddle is very rider specific, so it really depends on their body type and riding style, which plays a big role in what saddle would actually be best for that rider. Now, to give an example of how rider specific saddles can be, a rider with a wide pelvis might prefer a saddle with more padding when compared to a rider with a narrow pelvis might prefer a firmer saddle. Now, I want to play devil's advocate and talk about the benefits that a higher price saddle can make. So basically they tend to be actually manufactured out of higher quality materials such as carbon fiber or leather, and they tend to be more durable and long lasting. And since a saddle is something that I would say that should last above 2 bikes, it's an investment that you actually want to last and be comfortable. But I just want to highlight this last point about talking about expensive saddles is that 9 times out of 10, if you did an expensive bike fit, I'm pretty sure we can get an expensive saddle and a medium price saddle. And if we have the rider blindfolded, they probably might not choose the more expensive saddle. It's not a guarantee that, oh, because it's more expensive, therefore it's going to be better for the rider. Like I said, it's very user specific, and the benefits that a more expensive saddle has, I think it tends to be better if the rider is riding a lot. Then they should really be concerned about their saddle if they're doing 15 plus hours in the saddle per week. But for anything less than that, I think saddle choice is more of a, you go for the medium price range of saddles. Make sure that you actually get a bike fit and not just what it looks pretty or what brand. You actually make sure it feels comfortable and go from there, because a lot of people play a lot of time and effort into their saddles. And I would say that they usually tend to spend more money than they have to, because I've had my fair share of expensive saddles and medium price and even cheap ones. And it all comes down to the feeling, not necessarily the materials. That's more of a cherry on top, if you would like, in terms of, yeah, it's nice after the fact that the shape of the saddle actually feels good. Now, probably one of my favorite sections in terms of upgrades that just don't live up to the hype are high-end cycling shoes. Now, I would say the cycling shoe upgrade, along with even the carbon upgrade for rims, is very vain to some degree, because it's more of an aesthetic purpose rather than a performance. Well, both of them do have their fair share of advantages, which I myself find validity when talking about high-end cycling shoes, because there was a big difference from going to, let's say, a low-tier cycling shoe that I used when I was a junior, a beginner, versus the shoe that I have now that I ride with on majority of my rides. I want to highlight that the best cycling shoe for a specific rider depends on a multitude of factors, but primarily foot shape and pedaling style, and that's going to affect what type of shoe they go for. Now, an example of this is a rider with a high arch may prefer a shoe with a wider toe box, while a rider with a flat foot may prefer a shoe with more snug fit. So it really depends from foot shape and rider preference. Now, yet again, I will be playing devil's advocate, and I would say that more expensive cycling shoes tend to have way better materials than the lower tier cycling shoes. And I will not justify that or try to debate that, because when I upgraded to the S-Works 6s back when I was just getting out of the junior rank, the shoe quality and just the overall feeling and power transfer that I felt was a lot better than my beginner shoes that were just, plastic Shimano shoes compared to my S-Works that had carbon fiber sole. So I'm not going to debate there. Then again, is that the reason why potentially in certain races I was getting dropped? Definitely it wasn't my shoes, but I would say that in terms of making you feel more connected to your bike, and then obviously the vein, how it looks, aesthetic of it, I will not debate that. The high-end cycling shoes, tend to be better materials, tend to look better, tend to feel better. So in terms of that aspect, there are a lot of pros that I like to talk about, and obviously I fell into that. But I just want to highlight for new riders or beginners, or even just the average rider, the cycling shoe is such a, in terms of like $600 shoes or $500 shoes compared to, a good pair of $150, $200 shoes like the Giro Empires, I would say that those shoes can perform just as good as $600 shoes. So I think that's kind of where I'm comparing it. If you're comparing it from like my beginner junior shoes that were like $60 compared to, $500 shoes, yeah, big difference in performance. But I would say when it gets to, $150, $200 compared to the more expensive top tier of the line, it's very, very, minute differences. And the one thing I find interesting when talking about shoes is, depending on your local bike shop, they might have only one selection of high-end shoes, meaning that they might only carry Specialized and they might not carry CDs, or they might not carry other brands. So it's really important that you actually get to test different shoes. Obviously, the one thing I hate about testing cycling shoes is you can never actually ride them. So you got to watch a lot of videos about people giving their opinion, and it's such a hard one, because obviously they can't just let anyone that wants to buy the pair of shoes to test it in the bike shop again on the trainer, because then it wrecks the shoe and it's not a brand new shoe. So cycling shoes sometimes are a hit or miss. So it's a hard one, because I've heard horror stories of people buying $600 shoes and then having to sell them, lose $200, because after 1 month of riding, it was just terrible. So hopefully you don't want to be in that situation. And I would say that usually if you fall into one brand, let's say you get into Specialized at $150, $200 price range, then you can kind of see if how they design their shoes in terms of the toe box, in terms of the arch, in terms of the general feelings, if it's true to size, because some brands do differences in terms of 0.5. So it gets very, very technical. I can go on a whole rabbit hole about this, but I just want to say that usually just stick to 150, 200. And then when the time comes, if you are in the market for it, your budget increases, or you are racing at top tier level, then totally worth the upgrade. Now, this is to wrap up the video, and I thought we'd leave the vainest of the vain for last, and it is clothing, but specifically aerodynamic clothing. Now, this is an area of the cycling market that just keeps getting better and better as the years progress, and I would say that it does give you an edge on the road in terms of performance benefits of aerodynamics, but it is such a minimal thing and it can be very, very expensive. And I want to stress this for all the beginners and all the average riders, that in most cases, a good quality, form-fitting, well-fitting cycling jersey can provide basically all the performance at a lower cost, meaning that if you're going for the club fit and your jersey's flapping like this in the wind, I'm pretty sure, you know, if you had a tighter fit, that's going to be a lot better than having to spend $300-400 on an aero design material jersey if it's still going to flap in the wind. You got to make sure that the fitting and sizing of your jersey, if you're going for that aero and those aero benefits, you have to make sure that it is skin tight to your body. So it's very common knowledge in cycling to reduce wind resistance and improve your overall speed. It's important to wear clothing that doesn't create unnecessary drag. So even myself, I have some jerseys that just are loose, either because I've lost weight, and when I wear them, you know, there's gonna be some flapping along. So if it was for a race, I definitely wouldn't run a jersey that has a more club style fit. And I also want to note that majority of riders thinking of upgrading to a one expensive jersey, either for the Sunday group ride or for their local crate, there's so many benefits and improvements that you can make on your position in terms of being able to be more comfortable in the drops, more tight, create less frontal area. There's so many benefits that you can make and improvements you can make on your position than focusing necessarily on clothing, especially when the fact that these clothes are pretty expensive in terms of all this new material and technology that they're using, that if you crash, God forbid, you know, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money replacing that jersey. So I would say that really look at your position, because I think every rider can make benefits, even myself included. So think of that first before upgrading. I would say where aerodynamic clothing can actually be justified for the average rider or just weekend warrior is probably if you are doing some type of, you know, time trial competition, meaning maybe it's your Wednesday night time trials. If you want to invest into, you know, aerodynamic clothing for that, then again, like I said, position, form, all that stuff could probably be improved before that, and you could probably come to the time trial, and let's say you're going neck and neck against someone every week and they have all the, you know, dazzle frazzle stuff in terms of upgrades, and you come just with a form-fitting kit and you also work on your position. I think at the end of it, you probably would be doing better, unless he worked on his form and then on top of that had clothing. So obviously, you know, it's a race against the clock in terms of every second matters, but it's just such a diminishing return because there's other factors that play in a role of how good the aerodynamics benefits will be if everything else is optimized. And that's why you see it at the pro level or just top tier racing level. Yeah, it makes sense when their form is so dialed in that the only benefits that they can really make is on their clothing. So just remember that if you're thinking of trying to save some watts and increase your average speed, just get a well-fitting jersey that's pretty skin tight and snug on your body. Now that basically wraps up this video about the top 5 road bike upgrades that just don't live up to the hype. And I see a lot of these upgrades being pushed on the masses in the cycling community because it's just easy to say, if you get these deep section rims, your average speed is going to increase by 3 kilometers per hour, or if you get this skin suit or this form-fitting aero jersey, you're going to save so much time on the group ride, and just doesn't live up to the reality of those claims. These upgrades just don't live up to the hype for the average everyday rider, and it's not even practical to basically use them on everyday riding as well. But hey, if you want to spend your money on deep section rims that look cool but actually don't do anything, who am I to stop you? Just don't be surprised if you don't suddenly become a cycling superstar overnight. But in all seriousness though, I would say before making any of these upgrades, just make sure that it fits your cycling needs, it fits your budget, and you think that there would be a benefit for making these upgrades. So do lots of research and consider if it's actually gonna make a net positive for your cycling. And if you guys did learn anything on this video, or if it provided value, just like it, subscribe to the channel, comment one upgrade that you got that just didn't live up to the hype, or another upgrade that you would like me to discuss. Like, subscribe, and until the next one, keep on pedaling.